So there I was, watching what had to be the most ridiculous diplomatic meeting in galactic history unfold before my optical sensors. And trust me, I've seen some doozies in my time as a council recording unit. The Galactic Council chamber, normally a place of measured discourse and careful political maneuvering, had been transformed into what could only be described as a panic room. Vexstar, our esteemed council leader, sat hunched behind his ceremonial desk like it was a military bunker. His 6 arms were twitching in what I'd learned to recognize as his imminent doom posture, while his eye stalks kept swiveling toward the entrance like he expected a predator to burst through at any moment. "Remind me again why we agreed to this meeting," Vexstar muttered, his translator struggling with the high-pitched whine of terror that had crept into his voice. Quinlow, our chief scientific advisor, looked up from his datapad where he'd been frantically reviewing human physiology reports for the 100th time. Because council leader, ignoring the humans didn't make them go away. In fact, it seemed to make them more interested in us. They sent 17 more diplomatic requests after we stopped responding to the first one. 17, Vexstar repeated with the kind of dread usually reserved for announcing extinction-level events. That's when the door chimed. Not burst open, not exploded inward, just chimed. Politely. "Oh, that's probably him," came a voice from the corridor. A human voice. Deep, friendly, and completely unbothered by the fact that he was entering a chamber designed to intimidate species that could bench-press small spacecraft. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked in, and I have to admit, the human was not what I'd expected based on the terror reports. He was tall, sure, but not menacingly so. He had what humans call brown hair, wore something called a suit that looked more ceremonial than combat-ready, and was carrying what appeared to be a briefcase rather than a weapon of mass destruction. He smiled. Actually smiled. And somehow, this made Vexstar's eye stalks retract further into his head. "Good morning, everyone," Jake said, setting his briefcase down and looking around the room with genuine interest. "Wow, this is an incredible space. The architecture is amazing. Are those load-bearing crystals? That's fascinating." Quinlow made a strangled sound that his translator rendered as, "He's scanning for structural weaknesses." Jake turned toward the sound, and his smile widened. "Oh, hi there, I'm Jake Morrison, Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. I'm really excited to be here." He extended his hand toward Quinlow, who promptly fell backward off his hover seat. "It's a greeting gesture," Jake explained helpfully, still holding his hand out. "Humans shake hands when they meet. It's friendly." "Friendly," Vexstar whispered, like Jake had just announced he collected sentient species for fun. That's when Jake did something that nearly triggered a council-wide evacuation. He sneezed. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Every alien in the room either hit the floor, activated personal shields, or in Quinlow's case, somehow managed to do both while upside down. "Oh, excuse me," Jake said, pulling out what looked like a small white cloth. "Sorry about that. The air recycling system in here is a bit different from Earth's." "Nothing serious, just a little tickle in my nose." He blew his nose into the cloth. And then, in a move that made Vexstar's eye stalks fully retract, he put the cloth back in his pocket. Quinlow gasped from his position on the floor. "He's collecting biological samples. In a portable containment unit." "It's a tissue," Jake said, looking puzzled. "For nose blowing. Look, is everyone okay? You all seem a little jumpy." He stretched then, rolling his shoulders and popping his neck with a series of small cracks. The sound of human joints, adjusting sent 3 minor council members fleeing for the exits. "Better," Jake said, completely oblivious to the chaos he'd just caused. "Long flight, you know. 6 weeks in hyperspace really tightens up the muscles." He walked over to the refreshment station, which had been specifically stocked with beverages safe for most galactic species. "Mind if I grab something to drink? And hey, can I get anyone else anything? Coffee? Water? I brought some tea from Earth if anyone wants to try it." Vexstar made a sound like air escaping from a punctured hull. "He's offering us unknown human substances." "I think it's actually a peace offering," Quinlow whispered, still on the floor. "Or poison. Probably poison." Jake poured himself a cup of what looked like brown liquid and took a sip. "Ah, that's better. Sorry, I'm not really functional before my morning coffee. My wife always says I'm basically a zombie until I've had at least 2 cups. He paused, looking around at the assembled aliens with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Are you all sure you're okay? I know first contact can be nerve-wracking, but I promise I'm harmless. I'm just here to talk." And that, right there, was when I realized the Galactic Council had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. They'd prepared for warriors, conquerors, or calculating predators. They'd gotten Jake Morrison, who was worried about whether everyone was comfortable and wanted to share his tea. After what Vexstar would later describe in his official report as initial reconnaissance by the human infiltrator, the Council decided to implement Protocol 7, Demonstration of Superior Force. Because apparently, watching Jake sneeze and offer beverages had convinced them that a show of strength was their only option. "Bring in the Devastation-class weapons," Vexstar commanded, his voice attempting authority but landing somewhere around nervous parent meeting their daughter's boyfriend. What followed was the most awkward display of military might I've ever witnessed. They wheeled in a plasma cannon, capable of liquefying small moons, positioned it directly across from Jake, and waited for his inevitable surrender, or at least a satisfying display of terror. Jake looked up from his coffee. "Oh wow, is that a Mark 7 plasma array? That's incredible engineering. What's the energy output on something like that?" Quinlo checked his notes frantically. "Enough to vaporize your entire planet," he announced, clearly expecting this to end the conversation. "Seriously? That's amazing. How do you prevent thermal cascade in the containment matrix at that power level?" "We've been struggling with that problem for decades." Jake actually stood up and walked closer to the weapon, examining it with what looked like professional interest. "Stay back," Vexstar squeaked. "That weapon is armed and dangerous." "Oh, it's beautiful craftsmanship," Jake said, crouching down to get a better look at the barrel assembly. "Is this crystalline focusing? And look at this heat dissipation system. You mind if I ask who manufactured this? Our engineers would love to see the specifications." The weapons operator, a battle-scarred veteran named Corks who'd intimidated species across 3 sectors, was now explaining firing sequences to Jake like they were discussing recipe ingredients. "This is not how intimidation is supposed to work," Vexstar muttered. "Perhaps we need a more direct approach," Quinlo suggested. "Activate the environmental hazard chamber." So they did. They brought Jake to their chamber of inevitable death, a room designed to simulate the most hostile conditions known to galactic civilization. Toxic atmosphere, crushing gravity, temperature fluctuations that would liquefy most species, and radiation levels that required special shielding just to observe from outside. Jake walked in wearing nothing but his diplomatic suit. "The gravity's a bit heavy," he called out through the intercom. "But it's not too bad. Reminds me of training back in Colorado. And wow, this heat is something else. Is this what your homeworld is like? That must be tough on air conditioning costs." After 20 minutes of watching Jake casually stroll around their death chamber, occasionally commenting on the interesting atmospheric composition, and asking if they had any water because he was getting a bit thirsty, the Council moved to their final intimidation protocol: physical combat. They brought in Thokmor, their official Council champion. 8 feet tall, 4 arms, natural armor plating, and reflexes fast enough to catch laser bolts. Thokmor had never lost a challenge in 17 years of service. "Your species will face our champion in honorable combat," Vexstar announced. "Surrender now, or face the inevitable." Jake looked at Thokmor, and immediately walked over with his hand extended. "Hi there, I'm Jake. Thanks for doing this. I have to warn you though, I'm not really much of a fighter. Hope that's okay." Thokmor, who'd been expecting pre-battle posturing, or at least some survival instinct, found himself automatically shaking Jake's hand and saying, "Ah, nice to meet you too." The fight lasted about 30 seconds, not because Jake was particularly skilled, but because every time Thokmor attempted an attack, Jake would duck, apologize for being in the way, and ask if Thokmor was okay. "Did I hurt you? Oh man, I'm so sorry. Here, let me help you up. Are you bleeding? We should get that looked at." After the 3rd time Jake helped him to his feet, and offered him a bandage for a minor scrape, Thokmor just stood there looking confused. "Is he?" Thokmor asked the Council. "Is he trying to make me feel guilty?" "I think it's psychological warfare," Quinlo whispered. "He's weaponizing empathy." "That doesn't sound right," Thokmor said, but he was already accepting Jake's offer to sit down and have some water. The final straw came when Jake noticed that Thokmor was favoring his left side. "You pulled something, didn't you? My dad used to get that from working construction. Here, try this." Jake actually started showing Thokmor stretching exercises, explaining proper warm-up techniques, and asking about his sleep schedule. Within 10 minutes, Thokmor was doing yoga poses, and telling Jake about his chronic back problems. "This is unprecedented," Vexstar announced to the now empty council chamber, as most of the members had fled in confusion. "Our most powerful weapons, our deadliest environment, our greatest champion, and somehow the human has turned it all into a friendly social gathering." Jake looked up from where he was teaching Thokmor proper breathing techniques. "Oh, are we done with the formal stuff? Great. So when do we get to the actual diplomacy part? I brought cookies. The council decided that perhaps a tour of their facilities would give them time to regroup and figure out what exactly they were dealing with. Plus, Quinlow had theorized that showing Jake their industrial capabilities might finally impress upon him the scope of galactic civilization's power. What they didn't expect was for Jake to be genuinely fascinated by everything. "This is incredible," Jake said as they walked through the primary manufacturing sector. "You're processing raw stellar matter into construction materials. The energy requirements alone must be staggering. How do you prevent cascade failures in the containment matrix?" Vextar paused. "It's classified." "Oh sure, I understand. Trade secrets. We have the same issues with our fusion plants. But wow, the scale of this operation is just amazing." They were passing through Sector 7, where a team of Zlithian workers were installing a new gravitational stabilizer when everything went sideways. Literally. The anti-grav unit they were moving suddenly started spinning like a gyroscope, having a nervous breakdown, and the entire assembly began swinging toward a group of technicians who were too surprised to move. Jake moved without thinking. One moment he was asking Quinlow about safety protocols. The next he was across the room, catching a 3-ton piece of equipment with his bare hands while simultaneously pushing 2 workers out of the way with his shoulders. "Everybody okay?" he called out, holding the stabilizer steady with one arm while helping a fallen technician to his feet with the other. "That looked like a gyroscopic failure. You might want to check the magnetic bearings." The entire work crew stood frozen, staring at the human who was casually supporting enough weight to crush a small vehicle while offering technical advice. "How?" one of the workers, a small blue creature named Blix, whispered. "How are you doing that?" Jake looked down at the stabilizer in his hands like he'd just noticed it. "Oh it's not that heavy. Maybe 800 pounds. I mean, it's awkward to hold, but the weight distribution isn't too bad." 800 pounds, Quinlow repeated faintly. He said 800 pounds. "Is that wrong?" Jake asked, looking concerned. "I'm not great with metric conversions. Look, where do you want me to put this thing?" What followed was the most polite industrial accident recovery in galactic history. Jake held the stabilizer steady while the work crew scrambled to get proper support equipment, all the while asking if everyone was sure they weren't hurt and whether their insurance would cover any medical expenses. "Do you have workers' compensation here?" he asked Blix while technicians frantically installed emergency clamps. Because that looked like it could have been a workplace injury, and someone should definitely file a report. Blix, who was still processing the fact that he'd just been saved by a creature that could apparently lift small spacecraft, managed to stammer, "Workers what? Compensation. You know, if you get hurt on the job, your employer should cover medical costs and lost wages. It's only fair." The concept of employer responsibility for worker safety was apparently revolutionary enough that it took 3 translators working in parallel to properly convey Jake's meaning. "He's concerned about labor rights," Quinlow muttered, scribbling notes frantically. "The human just performed an impossible feat of strength, and his first concern is workers' compensation." "Is this normal behavior for humans?" Vextar asked, watching Jake help the work crew run diagnostic tests on their equipment. "According to our intelligence reports, yes. They apparently have an entire regulatory framework dedicated to workplace safety." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." The situation got even more confusing when Jake noticed that one of the workers had a small cut on his arm from debris. "Hey, you're bleeding," Jake said, immediately pulling out what looked like a small medical kit from his briefcase. "Let me take a look at that." Before anyone could object, Jake was cleaning and bandaging the wound with the kind of casual competence that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before. "There you go," he said, applying what appeared to be an adhesive bandage. "Keep it clean and dry for a couple days. If it starts looking infected, make sure you see a doctor, okay?" Blix stared at his bandaged arm. "You carry medical supplies, basic first aid kit." "Doesn't everyone?" Jake looked around at the assembled aliens. "You don't carry first aid kits. Why would we carry medical supplies?" Quinlow asked. "In case someone gets hurt. I mean, accidents happen. It's just basic preparedness." The concept that individuals might take personal responsibility for the well-being of strangers was apparently another revolutionary idea. "He's a medic," Vextar concluded. "A combat medic. That explains the lifting strength and medical training." "I'm not a medic," Jake said, overhearing. "I just took a CPR class at the community center. Everyone should know basic first aid." "Everyone should know basic first aid," Quinlow repeated, writing furiously. He believes medical training should be universal. Well, yeah, what if someone needs help and you're the only one around? This question seemed to break something fundamental in the council's understanding of how civilized societies functioned. The human, Vextar said slowly, just casually lifted equipment that would crush most of our species, performed emergency mechanical repair, provided medical aid, and is now concerned about filing proper safety reports. And he thinks this is normal, Quinlow added. I'm sorry, Jake said, noticing their stunned expressions. Did I do something wrong? I know I should have asked before helping, but it looked like an emergency situation. You, Blix said, still staring at his bandaged arm, you helped us. Of course I helped, you were in danger. But you don't know us. Jake looked genuinely puzzled. So, you needed help. And that's when I realized the council wasn't just dealing with a physically powerful species. They were dealing with a species that considered helping strangers to be so fundamentally obvious that they couldn't understand why anyone would question it. After the industrial incident, the council decided to retreat to what they considered safe ground, formal diplomatic protocol. Surely, they reasoned, cultural exchange would be predictable. They'd done this with hundreds of species. There were established procedures, formal presentations, careful negotiations over trade agreements and territorial boundaries. They should have known better by now. So Vextar began, settling into his ceremonial chair with the kind of relief reserved for people who thought they'd finally found solid ground. Let us begin with the traditional exchange of cultural artifacts and dietary preferences. Jake's face lit up like someone had just offered him tickets to his favorite concert. Oh, that sounds great. I actually brought a bunch of stuff from Earth. He opened his briefcase and started pulling out items like he was unpacking for a family vacation. First, he said, setting down a small wrapped package, homemade chocolate chip cookies. My wife made them yesterday morning. She insisted I bring enough for everyone. He looked around the council chamber, mentally counting heads, tentacles, and eye stalks. Actually, she might have overestimated how many people would be here, but better too many than too few, right? Quinlow eyed the package suspiciously. These are consumable items from your homeworld. They're cookies, Jake said, as if this explained everything. Here, try one. He opened the package, releasing a smell that somehow managed to be warm, sweet, and completely alien all at once. Unknown chemical compounds, Vextar muttered. But I noticed his eye stalks were leaning forward slightly. It's sugar, flour, eggs, butter, vanilla and chocolate chips. Jake listed off, breaking a cookie in half to show the texture. Pretty basic ingredients. My wife's been making these for 20 years, she's got the recipe down to a science. Before anyone could object, Jake had walked over and placed a small piece of cookie directly in front of each council member. Just try a tiny bit. If you don't like it, no big deal. But I promise they're safe. I ate like 6 on the flight here. Blix, who had apparently decided Jake was some sort of protective deity after the industrial accident, was the first to try it. His expression went through several phases: suspicion, surprise, confusion, and then something that looked almost like bliss. He paused, his translator struggling with the concept. It's pleasing. Why is it pleasing? Because it tastes good, Jake said, like this was obvious. Food should be enjoyable, right? Life's too short for bland meals. This statement caused what I can only describe as a philosophical crisis among several council members. The idea that sustenance could be primarily about pleasure rather than mere survival was apparently revolutionary. Your species, Quinlow said slowly, consumes refined energy sources for recreational purposes. We call it dessert, but sure, you don't have dessert. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for moments of great tragedy. Dessert, Vextar repeated, like Jake had just introduced them to the concept of music or art. Oh man, we have got to fix that, Jake said, completely missing the existential crisis he'd just triggered. Okay, what else? Oh, pictures. He pulled out what looked like a small rectangular device and started swiping through images. This is my family. There's my wife Jenny and our kids, Sam and Lucy. This was taken at Sam's graduation last month. He held up the device, showing a picture of 4 humans standing together, all of them displaying what appeared to be aggressive happiness. They had their arms around each other and were showing their teeth in what Jake had earlier called smiling. Your offspring, Quinlow observed. They appear to be healthy. Oh yeah, they're great kids. Sam just finished engineering school, and Lucy's starting medical training next year. We're really proud of them. You're proud of them for pursuing dangerous technical specializations. Jake looked confused. Dangerous. Engineering and medicine aren't dangerous. Well, I mean there's some risk in any job, but they're both about helping people. Building things people need, keeping people healthy. Important work. Your offspring voluntarily chose careers dedicated to assisting others of your species. Well, yeah, that's what you do, right? Find ways to contribute to society, help people, make things better. Another philosophical bombshell. The idea that individuals would actively seek out ways to benefit their community rather than simply their own survival was causing visible distress among the council members. Are these offspring genetically compelled to altruistic behavior? Quinlo asked, taking notes frantically. Genetically compelled? No, that's how we raise them. You try to teach your kids to be good people, to care about others, to do work that matters. You deliberately trained your offspring to prioritize the welfare of other individuals over their own advancement. Jake was quiet for a moment, processing this question. I wouldn't put it that way exactly, but I guess kind of. I mean, taking care of each other is how you advance. When everyone does better, you do better. It's not complicated. It's not complicated. Vextar repeated faintly. Right. Like, my neighbor Bob is a teacher, and he's making sure the next generation knows how to think and solve problems. My friend Maria runs a food bank, feeding people who are having tough times. My brother-in-law is a firefighter, literally running into burning buildings to save people he's never met. Everyone's got a role, everyone's contributing something. The concept that an entire species might organize itself around mutual aid rather than competitive survival was apparently too much for several council members, who had begun making quiet whimpering sounds. Oh, and I almost forgot, Jake continued, oblivious to the mental breakdowns occurring around him. I brought music. He did something to his device, and suddenly the chamber was filled with what could only be described as organized sound. It had rhythm, melody, harmony, and something else that made it oddly compelling. This is one of my favorites, Jake said, nodding along to the beat. It's called What a Wonderful World. Seemed appropriate for a first contact situation. The song was apparently about finding beauty in simple things, appreciating everyday miracles, and being optimistic about the future despite challenges. It was performed by someone with a gravelly voice, who somehow made it sound both tough and tender at the same time. Your species, Quinlo said when the song ended, creates aesthetic experiences about emotional satisfaction with existence. We call it music, but sure, you don't have music either. Another tragic silence. Okay, that's definitely something we need to work on, Jake said. Music is huge for humans. We've got thousands of different styles, instruments, ways of making it. Some of it's for dancing, some for relaxing, some for when you're sad and need to feel understood. There's work songs, love songs, protest songs, lullabies, for babies. Protest songs, Vextar asked weakly. Yeah, music about things that need to change. Social justice, environmental protection, workers' rights, that kind of thing. Sometimes the best way to get people motivated about important issues is to put it to a good beat. You use aesthetic experiences to coordinate social reform movements. Among other things. Yeah, music brings people together, helps them feel connected to something bigger than themselves. Jake looked around at the assembled aliens, who were all in various stages of cultural shock. Are you guys okay? You look a little overwhelmed. Your species, Quinlo said slowly, shares resources for pleasure, documents family relationships, trains offspring for altruistic careers, and creates aesthetic experiences designed to promote social cohesion and reform. I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds pretty fancy, but yeah, basically. And you consider this normal behavior. Of course it's normal. What else would you do? And that question, I realized, was the sound of an entire galactic civilization having its fundamental assumptions about survival, society, and sapience completely demolished by a guy who just wanted to share cookies and family photos. The breaking point came about an hour later, when Jake asked if anyone wanted to see pictures of his dog. This is Buster, he said, holding up his device to show what appeared to be a four-legged creature covered in fur. He's a golden retriever. Sweetest dog you've ever met. Loves everyone. Never met a stranger. Is this a domesticated predator? Vextar asked, leaning forward with morbid curiosity. Predator? Buster? No, he's a big softie. His favorite activities are fetching tennis balls and taking naps in the sun. Oh, and he volunteers at the children's hospital. Volunteers. Yeah, he's a therapy dog. We take him to visit sick kids. Something about petting a friendly dog just makes people feel better. The kids love him. You weaponized a predator species for psychological manipulation of your own offspring. Jake stared at Quinlo like he'd just suggested the moon was made of cheese. Weaponized? No. It's therapy. The kids are dealing with scary medical stuff, and Buster helps them feel calm and happy. It's about comfort, not, what did you call it? Psychological manipulation. But you achieve the same result. Emotional compliance through calculated application of positive stimuli. Jake paused, looking genuinely confused. I guess if you want to put it that way. But that makes it sound so clinical. It's just kindness. The kids are scared and lonely, and Buster makes them feel better. That's not manipulation. That's just being nice. That's when Quinlo snapped. Stop, he shouted, his voice cracking with strain. Just stop. I don't understand what you're doing here. Jake blinked, clearly startled. I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? You walk into our most secure facility, casually survive our deadliest weapons, lift equipment that should crush you, provide medical aid to species you've never met, share food designed to produce pleasure responses, display evidence of systematic altruistic conditioning, demonstrate aesthetic coordination of social reform movements, and now you're telling me you deploy domesticated predators for emotional support. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Quinlow wasn't finished. And through all of this, you maintain that these behaviors are normal, standard expected conduct for your species. You show no signs of deception, no indication of strategic planning, no evidence of hostile intent, and yet everything you do is either impossible or incomprehensible according to every model of sapient behavior we've developed. Quinlow, Vextar said gently. Perhaps you should. No, I need to know. Quinlow turned to face Jake directly, his eye stalks quivering with frustration. What is your species' actual agenda? What do you want from us? What's your real purpose here? Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying Quinlow's face with what looked like genuine concern. Are you okay? You seem really stressed. I'm stressed because nothing you do makes sense. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. What part doesn't make sense? All of it. The strength, the kindness, the cooperation, the cookies. None of it fits any known pattern of sapient development. Jake sat down slowly, like he was trying not to spook a frightened animal. Okay, let me try to explain. You want to know what humans want, right? Yes. We want to be happy, healthy, and safe. We want our families to be happy, healthy, and safe. We want our communities to be happy, healthy, and safe. And we've figured out that the best way to achieve that is to help everyone else be happy, healthy, and safe too. Quinlow stared at him. That's it? That's it. But that's circular logic. You help others, so they'll help you, so you can help others, so they'll help you. It's not circular. It's cumulative. Every time someone helps someone else, everyone gets a little better off. My neighbor Bob teaches kids, so those kids grow up smarter and solve problems that help everyone. My friend Maria feeds hungry people, so those people have the energy to contribute to society. My brother-in-law saves people from fires, so those people can go on to help other people. Jake leaned forward, his expression earnest. It's like, imagine if everyone in the galaxy decided that instead of competing for resources, they'd work together to create more resources. Instead of fighting over territory, they'd cooperate to make all territory more livable. Instead of hoarding knowledge, they'd share it so everyone could learn and contribute. That's impossible, Vextar whispered. Why? Because it requires everyone to act against their own immediate self-interest. Does it? I mean, I'm happier when the people around me are happy. I'm safer when my community is safe. I'm more successful when everyone else is successful too. My self-interest includes wanting good things for other people. But what about resource competition, territorial disputes, survival pressure? We have those too. But we've found that cooperation works better than competition for solving most problems. When we work together, we can accomplish things that would be impossible individually. Jake stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the vast council complex. Like this place. I bet it took thousands of different species working together to build something this incredible. Sharing knowledge, resources, expertise. That's what humans do. Just, maybe more instinctively. More instinctively, Quinlow repeated. Yeah, we're social creatures. We evolved in groups, taking care of each other. The strong protect the weak. The smart teach the less educated. The skilled help the inexperienced. It's not strategy. It's just how we're wired. You're genetically programmed for altruism. I wouldn't say programmed, more like inclined. We have to learn to be selfish. Cooperation is the default. Quinlow made a sound that his translator couldn't quite handle. Your species has to learn to be selfish. Well, yeah. Little kids share naturally. They have to be taught concepts like mine and yours. They want to help, to include everyone, to make sure everyone's okay. Socialization is partly about teaching them when it's appropriate to be competitive, and when it's better to cooperate. And you teach them that cooperation is usually better. Because it usually is. I mean, look at our greatest achievements. Art, science, exploration, medicine, technology. Almost all of it came from people working together, building on each other's ideas, sharing knowledge across generations. Jake turned back to face the council. That's what we want to do here. Share what we know, learn from you, work together to solve problems that none of us could handle alone. There's no hidden agenda, no secret strategy. We just think the galaxy would be better if everyone was working together instead of being afraid of each other. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. This wasn't confusion or fear. This was the sound of minds being fundamentally altered by a completely new way of thinking about existence. Your species, Quinlo said slowly, achieved interstellar travel through cooperative effort. Of course, it took thousands of scientists, engineers, pilots, support staff, funding from multiple governments, resources from dozens of countries. No single human could have done it alone. And now you want to cooperate with us. We want to cooperate with everyone. That's the point. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter or sobbing. We've been preparing for invasion, conquest or exploitation. We never considered the possibility that a species might contact us simply because they wanted to be friends. Friends, Jake repeated, smiling. Yeah, that's exactly what we want. To be friends. And that's when I realized that the Galactic Council wasn't just meeting humanity's first ambassador. They were meeting the galaxy's first species that had evolved beyond the assumption that strength and kindness were mutually exclusive. The emergency session was called 37 minutes after Jake's explanation, which had to be some kind of record for how quickly the council could move when they weren't paralyzed by existential terror. Representatives from 43 different species packed into the main assembly hall, all talking at once in what sounded like the galaxy's most confused support group meeting. Jake sat in the center of it all, looking like someone who'd volunteered to help organize a school fundraiser and suddenly found himself accidentally running the entire education system. Order, order. Vextar called out, his voice cracking with the strain of trying to moderate what was essentially a civilization-wide nervous breakdown. We need to address the human situation systematically. What situation? Jake asked, raising his hand like he was in a classroom. Are we having a situation? I thought we were just talking. You, announced Representative Corlex from the Rigelian systems, pointing one of his forearms dramatically at Jake, have destabilized our entire understanding of interspecies relations. I have. Yes. Our entire diplomatic protocol is based on strength displays, resource negotiation, and territorial boundary establishment. But you're suggesting we simply cooperate. Well, yeah. Why wouldn't you cooperate? The question hung in the air like a challenge to the fundamental laws of physics. Because, Corlex continued, his voice rising to a pitch that his translator was struggling with, cooperation requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability, and vulnerability leads to exploitation. Jake looked genuinely confused. Does it? I mean, we cooperate with each other all the time on Earth. My wife trusts me to pick up groceries. I trust her to handle our finances. My neighbor trusts me to water his plants when he's out of town. I trust him to keep an eye on our house. It works out fine. But what if your neighbor decides to invade your territory while you're vulnerable? Invade you mean like steal my house? Why would he do that? He's already got a house. Besides, if he tried something like that, the whole neighborhood would know about it and nobody would trust him anymore. He'd end up worse off than when he started. The concept that antisocial behavior might be self-defeating rather than advantageous was apparently another revolutionary idea. Social accountability, Quinlo muttered, taking notes furiously. Reputation-based enforcement of cooperative behavior. Plus, Jake continued, if Bob was having problems with his house, I'd just help him fix it. It's a lot easier than stealing mine, and then we'd both have nice houses. You would assist a potential territorial rival in improving his competitive position. Representative Zephyra from the Crystalline Confederation observed, competitive position. He's my neighbor. If his house looks good, the whole neighborhood looks good, which means my house is worth more too. Rising tide lifts all boats. Rising tide lifts all boats, Vextar repeated slowly, like he was trying to decode an ancient prophecy. It's a saying, means when everyone benefits, everyone benefits. You know? The assembled representatives clearly did not know. Look, Jake said, standing up and addressing the room with the kind of patient enthusiasm usually reserved for explaining basic concepts to children. I think maybe we're overcomplicating this. What if we just tried working together on something small and see how it goes? Such as? Corlex asked suspiciously. Well, what problems are you all dealing with? Maybe we can help. What followed was the most accidentally therapeutic diplomatic session in galactic history. One by one, representatives began sharing their civilization's challenges, and Jake responded to each one with genuine interest and practical suggestions. The Andromedans were struggling with food distribution in their outer colonies. Jake suggested supply chain optimization techniques that humans had developed for disaster relief. The Centaurian Trade Alliance was having resource conflicts over mining rights. Jake recommended cooperative ownership models and conflict resolution processes. The Vegan Peace Corps was dealing with environmental degradation. Jake offered to share Earth's renewable energy technologies and sustainable agriculture practices. Wait, Zephyra interrupted. You're just giving us solutions. without negotiating trade agreements or territorial concessions. Why would I negotiate? You asked for help, I'm helping. That's how help works. But what do you get in return? Jake looked around the room at the 43 different species, all hanging on his every word. Are you kidding? I get to learn from 43 different civilizations. Do you have any idea how incredible that is? Your species has been exploring space for thousands of years. You've solved problems we haven't even encountered yet. You've developed technologies we can't imagine. You've created art and music and literature from perspectives we've never considered. He paused, his expression growing more excited. Just the crystalline confederation's work with harmonic resonance engineering could revolutionize our understanding of physics. And the vegan Peace Corps' ecological restoration techniques could help us heal damaged ecosystems on Earth. And don't get me started on Andromedan's distributed manufacturing systems. You want to learn from us, Korlek said, like this was a foreign concept. Of course I want to learn from you. Why else would we come all the way out here? To conquer us, Vextar said automatically, then paused. I mean, that's usually why species seek contact with others. Why would we want to conquer you? That would be terrible for everyone. You'd be miserable. We'd have to spend all our time and resources on oppression instead of exploration, and we'd miss out on everything you could teach us. Jake walked over to the main display screen, where a map of known galaxy was showing the territories of various species. Look at this. You've got representatives from 43 different civilizations here. That's 43 different ways of solving problems. 43 different perspectives on existence, 43 different approaches to art and science and philosophy. He turned back to face the assembly. On Earth, we have about 200 countries, and some of our greatest achievements came from international cooperation. The space station, the internet, medical research, climate science. Imagine what we could accomplish with 43 different species working together. He's describing a galactic cooperative, Quinlo whispered to Vextar. A voluntary alliance based on mutual benefit and shared knowledge. I heard him, Vextar replied faintly. No, you don't understand, Quinlo continued, his voice rising with excitement. He's not just describing it as a hypothetical, he's describing it as an obvious next step. He thinks this is what rational species naturally do when they meet each other. Representative Thorne, from the Outer Rim territories, raised what appeared to be a hand. Ambassador Morrison, are you suggesting that humanity wishes to form a friendship alliance with all galactic civilizations? A friendship alliance? Jake grinned. I like the sound of that. Yeah, absolutely, why not? Because it's impossible, Thorne said, but his voice lacked conviction. Why is it impossible? Because it's never been done before. So, lots of things had never been done before, until someone did them. Flying had never been done before until we figured out airplanes. Going to space had never been done before until we built rockets. Making friends with alien species has never been done before until now. Jake looked around the room at the assembled representatives. Besides, it seems like you're all already part way there. You've got this council, you have diplomatic relations, you're talking to each other instead of fighting. You're just missing the friendship part. The friendship part, Zephyra repeated. Yeah, the part where you actually care about each other's well-being. Where you celebrate each other's successes and help each other through difficulties. Where you share resources not because you have to, but because you want everyone to thrive. And humans would be willing to participate in such an alliance. Are you kidding? We've been hoping for something like this since we first looked up at the stars. The chance to be part of a galaxy-wide community of friends working together to explore the universe and take care of each other. That's literally the best-case scenario we could imagine. There was a long silence as representatives contemplated this radical concept. Finally, Vextar spoke up. There would need to be protocols, procedures for cooperation, resource sharing, knowledge exchange, mutual defense. Sure, Jake agreed. We're good with protocols. We've got lots of experience with international cooperation, and there would need to be training. If we're going to implement these human-style cooperation techniques, our diplomatic corps would need to learn them. Of course. Happy to help with that. You would teach us, Korlek said slowly, how to be friends. Jake paused, looking around the room at all the alien faces staring at him with mixture of hope and confusion. You know what? Yeah, if you want to learn, I'd be honored to teach you. And that's how Jake Morrison, who had come to the galaxy hoping to establish diplomatic relations between Earth and one or two nearby civilizations, accidentally became the director of the first Intergalactic Friendship and Cooperation Institute. 3 months later, He was still trying to figure out why everyone kept referring to human kindness protocols as a revolutionary military strategy, but he'd stopped asking, because the questions just seemed to confuse people more. Besides, he was too busy coordinating the galaxy's first joint scientific expedition, mediating a resource-sharing agreement between 6 different species, and planning the inaugural galactic community potluck dinner, where everyone would bring traditional foods from their homeworlds to share. "You know," he told Jenny during their weekly video call, "I think this diplomat thing is working out pretty well." Behind him, through the window of his new office, 43 different species ships could be seen docked at the newly constructed peace station, their crews working together on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to achieve alone. It turned out that when you stopped assuming strength and kindness were mutually exclusive, the universe became a much more interesting place to live.